We're excited to have the club's own Christine Milleker live in studio for a presentation on macro photography. Christine's attention to detail and artistic vision shines through much of her digital work and in the darkroom, where her enthusiasm creates an interest of not only how things work, but why. And that's why she leads all of my kids' classes in darkroom, digital, and alternative process photography. Welcome, Christine.
Good evening.
Christine, your interest in photographic techniques is all over the map, which is a good thing, I feel. Why is macro photography so special?
From the very beginning of me picking up a DSLR, I always was interested in the close-up of things. I just always enjoyed finding the beauty in those little things. And so I really got into doing the macro shots, even when I first was learning.
That's great. What is your favorite subject for macro photography? And do you enjoy outdoor or indoor lighting better?
Both have their challenges, and both of them I enjoy. I really love to go out and do things like equipment. I really like the gears, and like whenever we go to Tuscaho, to the museum there, that's one of my favorite places to shoot macro. But I also really love to do flowers and stuff like that. So kind of across the board.
Now, some people may not have been to Tuckahoe's, the gas and steam show. What's so great about them?
Tuckahoe, they just have a lot of really cool equipment, and you can get pretty close to it, even with the few places where there are chains up to prevent you from getting too close. Mostly whenever they're running the equipment, but there are a lot of other places where you can just get up and get really close to it, and you can see the rust on some of the equipment, or you can see the gears, or it's just really fascinating to see the bolts and see what kind of photos you can get.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place. Lots of, as Christine mentioned, a lot of rust, a lot of texture, a lot of great stuff. In your alternative photo classes, Chris, you have a lot of the kids and of course the adults too make photograms. Now, from what I know about macro photography, that almost really qualifies as a macro photograph. Is that right? What do you think?
Yeah, if you're doing contact prints with flowers and leaves and stuff, it is exactly 1-to-1, which meets the definition for macro photography.
Kind of like cheating a little bit for macro photography, right?
Yeah.
Well, unless we have anything else we want to talk about, let's go ahead and get into your fantastic presentation. Now, I know you've been working on this a long time, and would you like to have questions come through as people may ask them, or would you like people to wait until the end?
We can do some of both.
Okay.
Answer if it's pertinent to that section, or wait till the end.
Perfect. And if we don't get to it, we'll just add it to the end. How about that?
Yeah.
Okay, Christine, you have the mic.
So today we're going to be talking about micro photography, and I named it Finding Beauty in Small Things. One of my favorite things is always simple pleasures, and to me, micro photography is perfect at that. It allows you to look at things and find the beauty, and you can find it anywhere, in your house, in the outdoors, in your barn, anywhere. Next slide.
Next slide.
So first, let's define macro photography. Officially, it is defined as 1-to-1 or larger image of something, or magnification. 1-to-1 meaning that when you take the photo, it's the same size on the sensor of your camera. What does that mean? It means that it's the same size or larger whenever you get your photo. And why should you care about this? It's very easy to find macro shots. It's very easy to look around and become creative with them.
Now, when you say the same size, is that basically if I'm photographing a dime, the projected image on my sensor is the same size as the object? Is that what you mean by 1-to-1?
Exactly.
Excellent. Now you say find the beauty in the ordinary. What does that kind of do for people that may think that they don't have anything to photograph, especially around this time when we're kind of stuck at home?
You'd be surprised where you can find things to photograph. Look through your kitchen, look in your bathroom. That assignment we did a couple weeks ago where you went through your bathroom, a lot of the shots I found were the macro shots. Look at the lines of where things go or where things cross and really get in. And the next few slides show what I mean by finding the beauty in the ordinary. Go ahead to the next slide. Here is some of my photos from the bathroom assignment we did a couple weeks ago. You can see one's a handle to one of our door cabinets, but you might not know that by looking at the photo. You can see the metal, you can see the shadows, you can see the lines of the wood around it. But to me, that's a beautiful shot because you have the lines and you have the parallels and all of that involved. And then you also see the brush that was there. And then here...
Oh, I'm sorry, I'll go back. I'm jumping the gun on you. Go ahead and yell at me.
So here, this is a shaving brush that we have in our bathroom. And I just love the way the hairs stick out and how it's crisp but yet fades away into blurriness. Next slide. This was from my father's garden whenever we were visiting Florida. And I just loved the curly Q and the metal around it and the way the lines and the circles repeat throughout the image.
Christine, we have a question from Jackie. Jackie asks, how can you tell as a photographer? I'm guessing she's asking, how can you tell that you're really at a one-to-one on your lens? And do you really need to? Do you really need to worry about that? Or is that just something for the lens and math?
That's the official definition. And no one's going to really get on your case if you're a little bit off or if it's close or not quite. People aren't going to be able to tell that you cropped in a little bit. But you're going to have better clarity and better in focus areas if you are close, if it's all in one plane. We'll get into a minute why a lot of macro shots are out of focus or have lots of areas that are.
Remind me, because Jackie brings up a good question, and you brought up something really cool that you can kind of fake it as cropping, right?
Yeah.
So, so as long as it looks like macro, you call it macro. At the end of the day, hey, it's macro, right?
You have a dime that you blow up to 11 by 14 but fills the frame. That's a macro shot.
That's great. Ready to go to the next one?
Yeah. This is from a bird feeder, just the seed lying there. And this isn't cropped. This is just the way I took the photo. So I got right up inside it and you can see the seeds spilling out. And you may not know exactly what that is and not everyone would think of taking that shot. But I just liked the different colors and I liked the clarity of it coming out.
I like the sharp depth of field. I'm not sure if everybody can see when that wood, I guess that's wood or that's a piece of plastic, but that really small area that's in focus up top, and then that mirrors down on the bottom as well. That's really good. And that's beautiful textures. I mean, I wouldn't have thought about that either.
Next slide. This is a close-up of a globe that was in my dad's garden, and I just loved the cracks on the glass and that you can see the different textures behind it. You can see the grass and the path that was going through there, and I really enjoyed that. Go ahead to the next slide. This kind of shows you your typical macro. This was a little tiny lizard. I loved the colors behind him. I loved how clear I got his eye and nose, but the rest of him fades off into blurriness. But I really liked this little lizard. Go ahead, next slide. This is the tip of a cigar, and we put it inside of a cutter just to get that circle around it. And I just really love the clarity and the way you can see the striations of the tobacco that wind through the cigar.
That's really nice. I don't think I would have really thought about putting, just making sure. And that's something I shoot macro twice a year. That's why I don't own any macro stuff. But I would almost think that I would not look at the background, and I wouldn't think to put something back there that declutters the background. That's a great shot.
Okay, next slide. And here's that cigar again, but we lit a lighter in front of it, so you have the flame but I have the flame out of focus and the far end of the cigar is out of focus, but you can see the leaves of the wrapping of the cigar, and I just really love that. Go ahead, next slide. This is a close-up of a watering can that my dad had in his garden, and I just loved the way the natural light reflected in from outside, and that you see the consecutive circles circling out, and you have the repeat of the little tiny circles. Next slide.
That's beautiful. That's a very nice abstract.
And then this was a little tiny leaf. This is, you'd think it was a pretty large leaf, and I should have gotten a photo of the full vine, but this is a really tight close-up of a leaf that was probably the size of my little pinky. And I just love the way that it twirled into the frame, and then you see the leaves wrapped around the pole that it was on, and then you have the darkness behind it. Okay, next slide. And here, the ordinary, just the tip of a pen going off into the distance at an angle, but this is something that anyone can take a photo of. So this is something that lies around your house that you can take at different angles. You could have done the other end. Find ways to be creative with the ordinary things that you use every day.
One of the things I usually like is sometimes you'll see them online where it'll say, look at these macro photos and what are they of? And you can barely tell what they are of. And that would be interesting, Christine, is even if you had gotten closer in on the back of that cap. Thankfully, we see, I guess that's Mr. Bick down there. Thankfully, we see Mr. Bick. So we know that that's a pen, but I can see you cropping that down and people being, having no idea what that could be.
Right.
I love the how you use the focal plane as kind of the anchor for the bottom of the photo, and the black and the brown just really makes everything pop. Very nice. Ready?
Thank you. Okay, next. So the next thing you have to talk about with macro photography is depth of field. The things you need to remember is that the closer you are to a subject, the smaller the depth of field will be. And the smaller the aperture of your camera, for example, f/22 will allow bigger depth of field, but it also allows less light in, and therefore you will have slower shutter speeds. And then whenever you go to faster shutter speeds, for example, having f/2.8, you have a shallow depth of field, but it allows more light in and allows faster shutter speeds. It's important to keep this in mind if you're shooting things that are moving or if it's a living person, because they're not going to hold still too well for you. So you need to keep that in mind. Like if you're doing living bugs, or even if you're outside and it's a windy day, if things are going to move, you don't want to have too shallow depth of field because your shutter speeds are going to be too slow.
So what you're saying is, let's say if you're shooting a plant that typically doesn't move very quickly, you can shoot a smaller aperture, right?
Right.
Therefore, you can have your bigger depth of field, but it allows less light in. You may be taking a second, 2 second, 4 second photo, right?
Correct.
Okay. And for the next line, which is faster aperture, actually f/2.8, you're going to need that for what? What are you going to need to do that for versus a smaller aperture?
I'm sorry, I don't.
Let's say, what kind of subject are you going to need to use a faster aperture that's going to need a faster shutter speed?
So you need something that's not going to move on you. So something like a coin or a flower that's not in the wind or isn't going to be moved by something, or you need a stable surface. So you want to have your camera on a tripod or monopod. And you also need to keep in mind that just the vibration of your shutter opening can also affect the movement in your photo. So you'll want to use a release cable or a timer so that you can step away, because just taking your hand off could shake your camera just a little bit. So that can cause blur.
That's good. Let's get back to that. We have a question, and I have an example. I think I have an example that you may tell me if you need a smaller aperture or larger. Butterfly gardens. We go to the butterfly gardens at Brookside every year when we can. You're going to need a faster shutter speed for that, right?
Correct.
So the problem is you're going to have a smaller depth of field. And Kathy asks, she says, is focus subjective? Is only part or both okay?
Both, depending on how you want your image to look. But whenever you're shooting things like butterflies, you need to keep in mind it's the eyes that, or in living subjects, it's usually the eyes that you want to get in focus because that's what people really connect with.
Now I've seen some of your photos, and sometimes you're going to you're keeping the, like that lizard, for example. Can we go back? Can we go back
Yeah.
to that lizard? For example, that lizard's eye is in focus. Now, I know some judges out there that would say, well, I really want the whole body in focus. How could you have a fast shutter speed and get more of the body in focus?
If you're parallel to him, you can get the whole body. If you look, his nose is also in focus. So I was just aiming off of the head. So I was just trying to get the face in focus. And at the way he kept moving, that was what I got in focus.
Okay.
So
if his head was turned a little bit to the right, you might have been able to come around the side of him and make your camera sensor parallel to your subject and get more of that in focus.
Correct.
Okay.
But I was just trying to get the eye and the nose, and he didn't have that in line with his body.
Now, what's right or wrong? As I said, some judges are going to throw this right out, and some judges are going to see it for the story you're trying to tell.
It's subjective. It's whatever you like. It's your photo and your art. So therefore, it's up to you how you want to portray it.
That's good to know. And like I said with judges, not everyone's going to like your shot and like how you compose it. But you know what? If you like it, that's, as Christine said, that's yours. Okay, let's go back down. Depth of field. Tell us about depth of field for anyone who doesn't know about it.
So the important things to keep in mind is focal distance and your focus point. So the further you are from a subject, the more wide your depth of field is going to be depending on what your aperture is. So you can be way far away and you'll have a wider depth of field with 2.8 than if you're right on top of the subject. But to be a macro shot, you're going to be pretty close to it. So that really shallows out your depth of field because of just how short your focal distance is. So that's something you really need to keep in mind.
So it sounds like you're kind of SOL for macro.
No.
No?
There's several things you can do. You can open up your f-stops, or you can focus stack if it's something that's not going to move and you can take multiple photos. There's a lot of things you can do to try to compensate.
And I know you're going to talk to us a little bit about focus stacking as well, but you're saying you can now when you say open up, you really mean close down with your. I know you like using the terminology of 22 and f8 to open up, but you're talking about like f22, which is a smaller hole than like
Correct.
f8. Okay.
Sorry about
Excellent.
that.
No problem.
Not trying to confuse anyone.
Do you have any examples?
I do. Move to the next slide.
Oh, wow.
So this is one shot, and we're going to go through a series of this exact same shot at different f-stops. So this starts at f-stop 440. So from here, we're going to expand out and see where we go. And if we move to the next slide.
You said that's F4, right?
So this is F4.
Okay.
But if you look, can you see your mouse on the screen?
I'm not sure if my mouse is showing up on the screen. Let me see. Let's see if I can make it happen. Let me see if I can pop this up over here. Properties, display, capture. There we go. I think we have a mouse.
Okay, so look across. Do you see where the focus is? If you look, this is going to be slightly wider than the one previous to this.
Not by much. What's this? Is this is this 5.6?
Probably. So
I know you went whole stops from 4 and up. 4, 5, 6.
So F8.
F8.
So you see it's getting wider. F11. 16.
6. Oh, do you see the quality of the plan in the background getting a little bit more in focus?
Yeah.
And that's your acceptable field of focus. Okay.
And you see the bench is becoming more in focus, and
right.
And
even more.
Even more. And more.
And that's it. That's
it.
But that's f45. Thankfully, the macro lenses usually have you can do a higher aperture.
Right. So if you move to the next slide, you'll see the first shot and then the last shot. So you can.
Do you want to talk about this now? Because I noticed one thing in these photos from the first one to the last one, and we might be able to see it on the screen, maybe not. I see sensor junk.
Yeah.
What's the problem? What's the problem with with? Is there another problem with making your aperture so darn small?
So the smaller that your aperture is, the more sensor boogers and all that type of thing are going to show up on your photos.
So if your sensor is not perfectly clean, you're going to have a little bit of cleaning up to do. Photoshop.
Right.
Okay. Fair enough.
So if you look here and you look at the top corner, it's f4. So you see how really narrow that depth of field is. And then if you look down, that's f45. So you can really see how much wider that depth of field is. So you can get an idea of the difference.
I like how you can pick something in the middle, because the f45 one, I don't like how there's so much detail in the background. But if you look at the f4, man, that white spot on the left is completely blurred out.
A lot more gray, and I like that better too.
Right.
As I said, it's subjective as to how much detail you want to have, and it can make a huge difference.
That's great.
Okay, next slide. So now let's talk about the equipment you need to take macro shots. The first thing you can use, and that we try to show you, is using a standard lens. There are usually things you need to get to help you use your standard lens. And we have a few of them sitting here that we can show you.
Let me go to our remote camera here. Where is that? Right there. Oh, there we go. Hi, everybody. Okay, what do we got?
So the first thing that is, and one of the cheapest ways to do macro shots, is to use diopter filters, which are called close-up filters. That's 10 times.
And these screw onto the end of your lens?
Yeah, these screw onto the end of your lens.
Okay.
And then this is only a one time. Whenever we talk about them more in detail, you'll see a little better the difference and how close and far you can get to things with these.
Ooh, that's way out of focus.
So
you're saying these are your entry levels. How much do these usually run you?
they're about $10 to $15, I believe.
Okay, so they're actually pretty cheap.
You can get them in a nice little carry case that you can put them in and protect. And we have 4 different sizes. So you have 10x, 1x, 4x, and 4. That's 4x and 2x.
Okay.
So you have 1-time magnification, 2-time magnification, 4-time magnification, and 10-time magnification. And it's just a nice little set that you can get on Amazon. And you just screw it onto the tip. Just find out the lens that you want to use. I use these on my 70 to 200 so that I can have that longer focal distance. And so that's the size I got.
What is going to dictate you picking which sizes you want? Obviously, you want to pick a size for your lens, but what if you have several different lens filter sizes? What do you want to do then? Do you need to buy every single filter size?
No, you don't. They make, if you look on this photo, the top right.
Let me go back to over here. Your step up and your step down rings. Excellent.
So if you want to get the one you think you're going to use the most often, like I got the 77 millimeter, I believe it is. But like if I wanted to use it on my 24 to 70, I believe it's a 72 millimeter. So then I can just use a step down ring to make it. So
kind of a one size fits all. Now I know you have some 82 millimeter lenses as well. The problem with that is I remember you kind of complaining about that, where saying that either that you couldn't find this, or if you found it was very expensive.
Right.
So the thing is if you're going from 75 and you're kind of creating that little vignette to go down to 72 or 85 to 77, you're probably not going to be that much of a deal, right?
No.
Okay.
Another thing that you can do if you're not going to do a lot of shooting is extension tubes.
Now I've got a set of these, and these are kind of fun. Of course they're collecting dust, but this is the next level extension tubes.
Yes. I can't tell you off the top of my head the price.
I think they're about $100, and then you can buy a couple different kinds. You can buy extension tubes that have the electronics that go through, and then you don't. Then you have an extension tube that doesn't.
So if you're not very good at hand doing your focus, manual focus, then you might want to get the more expensive ones like these are, because you can focus through the tubes.
Okay. Bob asked a question. He says, "How in the world does 1x work?" Wow, Bob, that's a good question, because it really, ideally it shouldn't work, right? But let's just barely look at that, just barely doing something. So it's definitely not going to be 1x, right?
Yeah, most of the time you're not going to use the 1x. It just comes in the set, so.
Cool. Good question, Bob.
Another thing you can use is another way you can get macro is.
Well, hold on. Let's talk a little bit more about extension tubes first,
we'll go into
because
detail.
this sounds dangerous, and it sounds fun. It sounds like sensor boogers, and it sounds like you're begging for sensor boogers unless you're really careful.
Yeah, you do want to be careful and keep the end caps on them so that dust doesn't collect in them, because that can get into your sensor if you aren't careful. The other thing that you have to be careful with, that is another option for macro, is the bellows. And as you see, there are no end caps on this, so that's not good. We have to get some for it.
Well, you keep it in plastic, but what you're saying is you want to make sure that you keep dust out of here, because as you're expanding these, this is basically the same as the extension tubes, but you're picking, instead of being stuck at 12 millimeters, 20 millimeters, and 36 millimeters, which I'm going to ask you later, because I know you worked on it, if you can add these together. But this does it basically the same way. It looks like it's got a little scale on the side.
Right.
But the problem is, you said you need to make sure you either keep it really sealed up well in a bag, or you need to get yourself a body cap and also a lens cap. That way, or vice versa. That way you keep the dust out. Because as you're squeezing this bellows, you're going to be kind of moving dust around.
Yeah, but if you want to do something that's called focus stacking, bellows is a good way to do it, because you can be very precise on exactly how far and how close you are from
Oh, that's
the
a good
item.
point. That's a
So
really good
I
point.
just-
What else you got?
Another thing you can do is put your, again for the focus stacking, is put your camera on this.
Now this doesn't move like the bellows does. This basically will allow you to move your camera if you're already in a macro mode. This will allow you to move your camera very shortly, right?
Correct.
And this is a Manfrotto focus rail, and oh wow, look at that! As I'm turning this, it's moving so slightly. I would like that if your camera does not have something like this. But most cameras nowadays have a focus stacking option. You can also change the focus easily with your focus ring and do your focus stacking as well.
Correct.
Okay, what else?
The next and last one that I have an example of is a reversal ring.
Okay.
So if people don't know this, we are now shooting with Nikons, but I can use my Canon.
Old Canon nifty 50. Well, this is the 1.4. Okay, how are you putting this on your Nikon camera?
So to be macro, you put it on backwards. So you
meant to be hipster, you put it on backwards.
You connect it to your camera with this end next to your camera.
Okay.
So you put this reversal ring on it, which screws on, and then you screw the reversal ring onto your camera. The reversal ring is kind of the safest way to use a reversing lens. You can do it by just holding it there, but you're begging for dust to get into your sensor if you do it that way.
Ooh, I've heard about people using this as well to make their own lens babies, and they get something like this, and they put a piece of rubber hose that you can kind of turn that and twist it. Do you have examples of this setup in your presentation?
I do.
Excellent. Let me put all these back on.
The other important gear to have is your monopod, your tripod, your shutter release cable, so that you have that to push, or a timer on your camera so that you can push it and get away from it and not vibrate it while you're taking your photo.
I'm guessing that it's, if you have a camera, make sure you know in your manual, make sure you know how to zoom in. Like if you're doing live view, I guess it makes it really easy to be able to zoom in on the live view and really get a good critical focus.
Right.
And some cameras, I know my camera has focus stacking. Does that work well for macro?
Yes.
Perfect. Let's unless we have any other goodies and any other goodies to talk about, let's go back over to your presentation. Okay, you talked about monopod and tripod. Tell me what about monopod and tripod?
Well, they help hold your camera steady and keep you from having to hold and touch it, which can just hand holding you move a lot. So that's going to.
So not only shake, but also you're losing your focal plane.
Right.
Oh, okay, gotcha. That's great. We ready to the next slide?
Yes.
Excellent. Let's see what we got.
So now let's talk about the most expensive, but kind of the most, if you're going to do a lot of macro photography, you may want to invest in a macro lens. So what is important to know about this is that they can be expensive, but looking here for Nikons, the 105 macro is a minimum focal distance of 1 foot. And the 70 to 200, you have to be a minimum of 4.6 feet. So that's 3.6 feet difference of how far you have to be from your subject. So your macro is not going to, you're going to have a lot more difficulty getting macro with a standard lens.
I think we're cutting off the Canon. Is the Canon pretty much the same? I think it is.
Close.
Right? Okay. Let's see. Bearded Bob says, with the reversing ring, you can lose the ability to change the f-stop. Absolutely. You're going to be shooting wide open, Bob, unless, it's been a while. Unless you can, I seem to remember that somebody makes an electronics rig that would probably be right up your alley that you can actually stop that lens down, as necessary. But that's getting kind of crazy. If you're using the close-up filters and you're using the reversal ring, you're probably someone that kind of likes a more ephemeral or pictorial kind of soft, maybe focus, kind of playing with that stuff, right?
Right.
Okay.
So and manual focus is what's going to have to be done with the majority of those things.
Okay.
And even the macro tubes, I've found that sometimes, even the ones with the sensors, you still have to sometimes manually focus.
Okay.
Or get it close.
So if somebody wanted to get into this real cheap, would you recommend the close-up filters or kind of saving up a little bit more to make the extension tubes?
Probably the extension tubes, if you're going to do a fair amount or on occasion. The close-up filters were good, but you'll see as we go through, I'm going to go through each one a little more in depth and show you pictures taken with each one, and you can choose for yourself which one you think is better.
The worst case scenario, if you buy the close-up filters and you don't use them, you can terrorize the ants in the backyard. And if you don't use the extension tubes, then you got a whole new set of napkin ring holders. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
So these are some photos that I took with my 105 macro lens. You see I could get pretty close up to the bottle here, and you'll see in the next frame what it was. But because I used both my macro lens and my standard 70 to 200 lens, and I just really liked the metal here. I love the way the metal pressed down into the cork, and I just really enjoyed making these photos. And next, so here's with my 70 to 200. The closest I could get to that is the first photo, and then the second photo on the right is just showing you what the whole bottle looked like, and that was getting a little further away and taking a full-size photo of the wine bottle.
So what this is doing is it's giving you the idea that you can crop in and make yourself kind of a cropped fake macro shot, but you're losing a lot of that detail.
Right.
Okay.
You might have a slightly bigger depth of field on it and all that, but I really like the way the macro really gets in, and you're not going to lose the size of your photo either because it's taking up your full sensor.
Okay. Ready for the next slide?
Yes. So let's talk about the diopter filters or the close-up filters. So there's the 1+, 2+, 4+, and then the 10x. And they're cheaper, but they can affect the quality of your photos. If you move to the next slide, you can kind of see what that is. It's a photo taken with each. So the first picture was, and this is me not moving the camera. It was on a tripod. I focused, took the photo, changed the filter, focus, took the photo, just to show you how close each one got you to it. So I didn't move the camera. It was all exactly the same settings. It's just how close to show you what the filters do. If you look, it's not tack on focus, but it's pretty close, and I still like these photos, especially the 10x, where you can really get in on that marble and not have to really go in and make too many crops. But
it seems like instead of a 1x, 2x, 4x, it's kind of weird how they have them labeled here. 1 plus 2 plus 4, and then 10x. So Polaroid or whatever cheap company's making them with Polaroid's name on them is kind of doing that. Now you didn't include the marble without the +1 filter because it was so close. I saw you messing with it, and I saw you kind of overlaying them. So Bob, it's kind of one of those things, you know. What can we do to get some more money out of you? Maybe put a cheap piece of glass in it. It's got a little bit of magnification in it.
Right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is our extension tubes. The thing to remember about the extension tube is you have the 12 millimeter, the 20 millimeter, and the 36 millimeter. But depending on how close you want to get, you can mix and match them. So you can use just the 12 and 20. You can use the 36 with the 12, or you can use all three of them. The next slide, I start showing you the different focal lengths. So this was on my 24 to 70, and at 24 millimeters, focus came in at about 10 centimeters or about 9 centimeters with the 20. And this we can rush through, but whenever I went to 70 millimeters, it was just too far, I think, or do I have that backwards?
What's that?
The 24 versus 70. The closest versus, I think the closest was the 70 millimeter, and then the 24 millimeter was just beyond where my tape measure went, so I couldn't even see for the first two.
Gotcha. So basically what you're saying is these kind of, if you really want to be a mathematics nerd, which is kind of like what I like to do, I like to find out where these are, and apparently you do too. You can get in there and figure out exactly what to use where and which lens, but really you just put one on. If it gets you how you want to get, shoot away. If not, put the next one on. Next one on. So
if you go to the next slide, I did all the combinations of three of them together and each of the two mixed together. So you can get closer or further away depending on how many you stack.
I like that you can stack them.
Yeah. So next. So these are some of the photos I took with the extension tubes. So this was a lighter. So the far right one was with no tubes, with just standard camera, just to show you what the object looked like. But these are some of the shots I took with them. Next slide. So let's talk about the bellows. It functions much like the extension tubes, but they're not exact set millimeters. Again, you have to be careful of the dust that can build in those bellows as you move in and out.
How much was this?
This was about $25.
Okay, and I know they make it for Canon and Nikon because the first one you got, they sent to Canon instead.
Yeah, they sent the wrong one, so you have to be careful if you're ordering these. I believe we got it. We had trouble finding it anywhere but eBay. But okay, next slide. So these are some photos I took with the bellows. The focal point was very, very narrow, and I didn't get as clear of images as I was kind of hoping for, but I still like them. I love the way the 7 fades in the first one, and then the 8 fades in the second one, and then I tried to get one that was a little more even rounded. And then the bottom right is the humidifier gauge that I used that I took a photo of.
Which one's that?
The bottom right.
Oh, the Galileo thermometer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that wasn't helpful because that thing was moving up and down as you were shooting anyway. But this gives you the same. This gives you basically the same as the extension tubes, right?
Right.
But if you like soft kind of images like this, man, that's the way to go. I like them.
Yeah.
Those are fantastic. Next slide.
So next slide. So now let's talk about the reversal lens. And you have to and then you need to talk about hand holding versus using hand holding the reverse lens, which opens a sensor up to potential dirt, or you can get the reversal ring, which you can screw onto your lens, as John showed you earlier, and directly connect it. So that way you don't have to deal with dust getting into your camera.
Now I'm just looking at this here. It's a Photodiox. Is it Photodiox brand?
Mm-hmm.
Photodiox, and it specifically says macro reverse ring for the Nikon 58 millimeter. So Nikon mount 58 millimeter threads for your Canon 50 millimeter 1.4.
Correct.
Okay.
So I just looked at the size of my Canon lens on the front, found out what the millimeter there was, and got the right size for it.
Gotcha.
Next slide. And these are some photos I took with it. The depth of field was very, very shallow, but I really loved the way these turned out, the way the lighter faded into the background, and you kind of lost it, but you kind of aren't sure what it is. And like the bottom one, you can really kind of just see the threads of the wheel.
Wow, that's nice. I really like how that looks.
And then you can see the letter in the top right, just to show you what I was photographing.
Okay, very nice.
The next and last thing would be your macro lens. This is going to give you your best quality of a macro photo. You can get a lot closer to it, not worry about getting dust in your sensor because it's a real lens and it's on your camera. The way you can definitely use your autofocus, although sometimes it still will struggle a little bit just because of how close you are to this object. And you still have to remember it's about, especially with like my 105, it's still 1 foot away from your object. But it can be kind of costly.
Okay. We've got some questions. We've got some questions in the chat. I'm gonna go reversed. Chuck says, would it matter what brand of lens you connect as long as the mount end is correct, and I guess as long as it filters in correctly?
That's right. As I said, I'm using my Canon lens on my Nikon camera. It does not matter what brand, as long as it fits onto your camera.
And Lewis asks, do the extension tubes have that much of an effect on light?
It's a little bit. You lose a little bit of light with it, but not too much.
Yeah, I've never, honestly, Lewis, I've never, and I guess Christine just backed me up on this. It's never been that much of a deal that I worried about.
And you don't always have to use manual focus with macro. It's beneficial, but if you're using focus stacking, you can't.
Gotcha.
If it, like with the built-in feature in our D850, if you use manual focus, it will not work.
Right. But somebody without the focus stacking in their camera, they can specifically, move their ring, and keep going.
Right.
Excellent. Julie asks, can you use both? Oh, Julie likes to live dangerously. Can you use both the reversal ring and the extension tubes together?
You probably could if you found a way to put them.
I'm going to play with it right here while Christine's talking.
If you can get it to go on, you should.
Yeah, Julie, it actually fits. It should fit just fine. It's going to work. It's going to give you that really weird kind of look, kind of soft look, but it's just going to make everything a lot better.
If you did that, definitely manual focus though, because with the reversal ring you kind of have to anyway. But yeah,
Wow.
That could be interesting to try out. Next slide.
Okay.
So these are some of the photos I took with my Nikon macro lens. So you can see how close you can get up into objects and see what you have. So here you have the bristles of my shaving brush and then a metal measuring cup.
That's interesting because I can see, and we're broadcasting 1080p, but I can see on my screen just the quality of the sharpness on here, because that's just wow, that's just so much better than introducing another two more surfaces of glass or or kind of telling your lens to do something that really wasn't meant to do. But both Canon, Nikon, everybody out there that makes a macro lens has got their macro game on point. So that definitely, if you're a sharpness junkie, would you say this is probably this is going to be your best weight ever?
Yeah, this is going to give you probably the best sharpness. The rest are kind of soft, just because it's adding things to your lenses that you're already using.
Now, if you're kind of on the fence, you want to be sharp, you want to be a sharpness junkie on one side, but you also want to be able to kind of go out of focus and do some of those kind of weird out of focus things. You can still do that, right?
Yes.
Okay. You just take it out of focus a little bit, right?
Or adjust your aperture, or I mean, there's a lot of different ways you could do that.
Fantastic. JC's in the house. JC asks, does flash help increase the depth of field?
Yes.
Why?
It gives you more light, and you can widen your aperture. You can narrow up your aperture, so make it higher, and therefore you will get a better depth of field.
Okay. Do you talk about lighting in here?
Yes.
Because we'll talk about that, because I can almost see. Now my thinking is, when we're doing portraiture or anything, you have to worry about the apparent size of your light source. Now, for a bug or for a Matchbox car, a flash head is going to be huge compared to certain things. So my thinking is you probably have some tricks for us about that, don't you?
Yes.
Okay. Mary Lou asks, which macro lens would you recommend? Well, Mary Lou, it really depends on. I'm sure it really depends on your camera manufacturer. But what do you think, Chris?
For Nikon, and even I remember when we used Canon, your 100 and my 105, I really like both those lenses. I like them because you can also use them as good portraiture lenses, but they also do macro, and I really enjoy just using those lenses.
We haven't. I'm sorry, David. I missed a question from you. He says he's asking, shouldn't you always have manual focus for macro?
You can have manual focus for macro, but you don't necessarily always have to.
Well, ideally, if I know with your macro, it actually is very well down, because you were even using live view, and you were clicking on things when you were doing your focus stacking. So your macro definitely worked well. I remember with my old Canon, my 100 macro, I would always use autofocus to get me there, and then I would zoom in on the LCD and kind of, I would always still touch the macro ring.
Right, you can do it a little bit, but it doesn't necessarily have to be manual.
Gotcha. But we also do is we put our focus buttons on the back, so our shutter button and our focus button is not the same.
Right.
So therefore, if you are using autofocus and then you're kind of fine tuning, going that extra mile, and then you have your shutter button focusing and exposing and tripping the shutter, you will lose that again. So that really depends on how you have it set up. I like using autofocus to get me in the vicinity, and then go into a manual from there.
Yeah.
Right?
You
Excellent.
can do that. Mary Lou, you asked about zoom lenses. When I shot Canon, when I used my 24-70 from macro, I was very happy with the results most of the time. But Canon's 24-70 doesn't do the same. And when I was getting macro, I got my 105. So it's up to you what you want to do with it.
And she with the 100, the Canon 100 macro, and even probably the first generation, the old one that I used to have, it was probably just as good as anything you're as good, close enough to anything you're going to get today. Anything optically wise is going to be good. Even some third party stuff is probably going to be very good.
A 50 macro versus a 100 macro is how close in you can get to it. I don't know what the focal distance, how the minimum focal distance is on the 50 is. The 100, I believe, is about the same as the Nikon, which is about a foot. I haven't researched the 50, but it's going to be how far you have to be from the object that is going to be a determinant. And sometimes the zoom helps you get in closer and make a more close-up macro image.
So what you're going to do, Mary Lou, is go on the specifications on each lens and check out the minimum focusing distance. And ideally, you really should get your hands on both lenses. Either find somebody in the camera club. I think Michelle's got a 100 macro, and then maybe rent a 50 and try them out one day. Really, it's kind of subjective to what you like.
Whatever your tastes and the in them are. So the next thing we're going to talk about is using monopods and tripods. So why is this important with macro photography? It's important because you want to stabilize your camera. You have very shallow depth of field, so you don't want to be getting a little bit off and losing your focus on what you want your focus to be on. So setting it up, finding it, getting your hands off your camera and using your release cable to take the photo or using a timer and mirror lockup is really what's going to help you get sharp photos. And we've already talked about depth of field versus aperture. And the important thing to remember, though, is if you have a IS on your lens, you want to turn that off, because that can cause issues and vibrate the camera also if your camera's trying to use your image stabilization when it's already stabilized.
Okay. Ready?
Yep. Next. So let's talk about lighting. In these photos that you've seen tonight, I've used several different types of lighting. I've used the ring flash, I've used natural sunlight, and I've used the softbox. Two other types of light you can use is 45-degree light and axis lighting.
Now, on axis lighting, actual lighting is that's something that we were going to do for the actual meeting. And what that does is, and I don't think we don't have an example of that, but what that is, you're shooting. You've got a piece of glass. Let's say you're shooting a coin. Let's say you're doing a coin photography, and you have a piece of glass sitting at about a 45-degree angle over top the coin. Well, what you're going to do is you're going to shoot through the piece of glass straight down on the coin, and then you're going to kind of scoot some light in from the side, which will bounce off the glass, reflecting and then lighting up the entire coin. It's not going to bounce up into your camera lens. So therefore, you're basically using a ring flash, but you're lighting through basically you're lighting where your lens is anyway. And that's something maybe we'll continue to do. We'll do something maybe next year, or maybe we can do a little side live stream and you can demonstrate that.
Right. Next slide. So these are just some different types of lighting to show you what you can do with your macro shots.
I love the quality of that.
Yeah, I love the blur, but the sharpness, and this is just another take on those dandelion photos, but wow. You can see, and this was with a black background, so it's blurred out, but you get the sharp, you get it all in this.
That looks like a softbox shot, is that right?
That's a softbox shot.
Okay.
And then next slide.
Ooh.
So this is lighting up the background and getting a nice silhouette of the dandelion.
What did you light that with?
That was lit with a flashlight.
So you used a flashlight on the background and then just shot your silhouette.
Right.
Wow, that's nice.
Next slide. So
Ooh.
This was using a flashlight also, but with a red filter on it.
Wow, I like that.
Next slide.
Ooh.
So this is the red filter, but on the way out of taking the photo, we flashed the light on it, so this is also with a flashlight. So we were just playing around. So we used the red filter and lit up with the flashlight the dandelion.
Okay, so there's a lot of playing around with just kind of cheap lighting, interesting lighting. You can light the background, I guess, with a tablet, I guess, really, right?
Right.
Wow. A long time ago, I remember you made a really cool macro shot where you brought up a background on your monitor and you lit the subject in front of the monitor using the monitor as basically your digital background.
Right.
That's wild.
Next slide. And this is kind of doing the reverse, lighting up the background with the flashlight and hitting the red onto the dandelion.
Wow.
Next slide. And then these are some other things we did, played around with, and just had fun getting some close macros. Next slide. The last thing we're going to talk about is focus stacking. So what is focus stacking? It is taking multiple photos of the same subject with a narrow depth of field and then mixing them all together to get one image. We're going to talk about using Photoshop and Helicon Focus. There are some other options available, but those are the two that we have and that we use. So we have some videos that we're going to show you.
Okay, let's get this video started. Here we go.
So this first video is using This is Helicon focus.
Well, you're going to use Helicon, but this is what the new Canons, the new Nikons, excuse me, the new Nikons. I think the new Canons do it. I think a lot of the mirrorless cameras do it as well. But they will shoot your focus stacking or your focus shift in camera.
In camera. So you get your multiple photos. You can have them start in a new folder each time. What this does is you can choose how many shots you want. You can choose the depth, how big of a difference between each shot, and then the time between each shot, and you can program that all in your camera, and it takes all of the shots for you and makes it easy for you to take them into these programs to
now if your camera's not doing this and you're doing this with your just by rotating your focus ring, you can go front to back or back to front, but this one specifically you want to come up to maybe a little bit closer to the closest point you want to focus, and then as you can see it's shooting. It's on 9 of 25 now. It's going to continually go through that depth there. And what do you want to stop at? I guess you want to stop at the last part that you want to focus, right?
Right.
Okay.
And sometimes it's a little bit of a guess, so sometimes it'll take a couple tries to get the shot you want, depending on the depth of each step that you do, and depending on what you're looking for in your photo, how sharp you want it to be versus.
And some cameras now will even do all this in camera. So make sure you don't have. I think Mike has one that does it in camera.
Right. So as you see here, it's on.
You're almost
20,
done.
Almost done. And as you've seen, each photo moves back on the truck and the plants to get different depth of field.
Do you have a title for this photo? Stuck in a tree.
Stuck in a tree.
Almost done.
One more photo, and then we'll take it into Helicon focus first.
Okay, so you've taken it in the Helicon focus, and you're basically bringing all the images in. You want to look at the images ahead of time to make sure you're only bringing the ones in you care about, right?
Right. So if you went beyond the focus point where you wanted to stop, you just don't bring those into the program. Or
now I see you're going to render these. You're going to render each one of these in a different style, because Helicon's got 3 different methods.
Right. They have 3 different methods of mixing the photos together, and we'll quickly show you each of them. And you get 3 slightly different photos, even though it's all the same program. And I tend to like the A version, but and it depends on the photo too, exactly what is going on.
Okay, method C. You can see it kind of highlighting the sections that were in focus as we stepped back, because we did a pretty aggressive step from front to back.
Right.
Okay.
So if you use a shallower one, you're going to get more. You'll want more images to get to the photo, and to see what's going on. So here we go. Here's method A. This is the photo that came out of method A.
I see a little bit of ghosting around kind of the white areas up top.
A little bit.
Method B. A little bit less. Okay. A little bit of. Method C.
And method C. So here you have that big highlight on the truck window up in the middle.
So it's something it's pretty easy to just try all 3 and see how they go, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now this is Photoshop, right?
So this is doing the same image, but importing it into Photoshop. I'm showing you how to import it into Photoshop, but if you have Lightroom, you can also import it into from Lightroom into Photoshop.
Okay. So basically you're loading all the images into a stack, which puts one image on each layer, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And it's loading it in as different layers on the same photo.
Okay.
And then if you're doing this from Lightroom, you just select all the images you want to import, right click, hit edit in, and then open as layers in Photoshop.
Okay.
So
I know we're going kind of fast. People can go back to this point in the stream and kind of see how you're doing it as well. So you brought them all in. You've brought all these raw images into Photoshop.
Yes, and then I went in. Then I'm going up to edit, and and then auto align layers. So it's going to stack the lettuce and layers, and you want to hit auto.
So this is going to make sure all the images are as perfect as possible.
It's going to line up the images as close as it thinks is possible.
Okay, and you're going to blend the images.
And then you want to stack the images. Make sure you're not in panorama because you're not going to be happy with your results.
Okay, it's going.
Takes a minute for it to mix all those layers. You get one heck of a size of a file.
And it's interesting because Photoshop really doesn't give you that many options to do it, but Helicon, you have different ones. And honestly, I think this really turned out better than I feel that really turned out better than Helicon, to be honest with you. I know sometimes you use Helicon and sometimes you use Photoshop. So I guess it really depends on the subject.
On the subject and image, I am happier with the Photoshop version.
Let's see if we can get a large view up here. There we go, and that's the Photoshop version. That's really nice. Still, I can see a couple things you're going to need to fix up. You need to clean up, and that's something you can always stack. You can always layer. Let's say in front of that bumper, you need to fix that up. You can always bring that shot that's in focus and then kind of edit that in yourself, right?
Right.
Okay. Mary Lou asked, let's see, I'm going to make sure we're up on the questions. Mary Lou asks, how would, nope, wrong one. What is Helicon and how much does it cost?
I see Mike put in the Helicon's website, and how much?
If you wait, I don't remember how much it costs. I think it was $150 with the remote, but we use remotes at events. We use the Helicon remote at events, and if you wait for Black Friday or Cyber Monday, they usually have a special on that. But they have a 30-day trial, Mary Lou. Try it out if you like it. Definitely support them and give it a try. Ready for the next one?
Yep. And then, where do we go from here? You can print them, small or large. You can make triptychs or diptychs. You can make coffee table books from it. You can have fun and just experiment with them. As you see here, we got these little figures that we were just putting on top of the flowers to have fun with them. Or you can make a series of similar objects at different angles or the same subject. As you saw all the dandelion photos we had, you could mix them all together and make a book out of them or come up with different ways of experimenting with it.
That would be so. Your major takeaway of this is you're stuck at home, you're clawing at the walls, you're kind of bored of everything you've shot so far. You can now go back and explore it in miniature and probably find a whole new world.
Right.
Right? Wow, that's fantastic.
So have fun. And now we're open for any questions.
Do we have any questions? Michelle, if you would like to offer, we'd like to test out. Now, of course, we are working on our new mixer, which hopefully has sounded a lot better than we've had. But we'd be interested in taking a couple phone calls, one at a time. So if Michelle's up to it, message Michelle, and she will private message you a number, and we'll just get a line of people calling in. Or if you want to sit there and just ask questions in the chat, we can do them as well. And Mike reminds us for the May Photo Challenge. We did bring it up in the announcements. However, 2 weeks from now, we're having our next photo assignment, and your photo assignment is to create something macro. Now, you can create a macro with crazy macro lenses like Christine has, or you can just photograph something super zoomed in and crop down on it. Either way is great. We're going to put up a post in the Facebook group. And then we will also make sure that everybody gets the email address you can send your photos to. That way we make sure we have them all in the full size.
Okay, do we have any questions?
Michelle has just opened up the call line. Let me bring the volume up on that just in case we do get a call. We've had a couple people question to ask us if they could beam in or call in or whatever. So that's part of the new mixer, was having a couple call-in lines. We have any other questions? We'll be happy to get them in the chat. Lewis, thank you for joining us. Last call for any questions on the stream. I thought we'd have a lot more questions from that. You must have did a great job at explaining everything, Christine.
I tried. I tried to be thorough.
What is by far your favorite? I know I asked you this already, but let's talk a little bit more about your favorite things to shoot. What are what are you really kind of gravitating for?
I really love nature and flowers. I like to try to get different views of things, shooting up on flowers, or instead of shooting down on them, making tulips look like a tulip forest and stuff like that. Getting just the insides of a flower, stuff like that. I also love to shoot gears and just zoom in on the smallest parts of them.
I think we have a call coming in. Let's see how we do it. Hello, you are live. Who's this?
This is Russ Roberts.
Hey, Russ, what's happening?
Nothing much. When you were talking earlier about tripods and monopods, is it advisable if you have a mirror to lock your mirror up when you do the close-up stuff so that you don't get the mirror shake?
I'm going to pass over. I'm going to pass my headphones over to Christine. So I am flying blind. Christine, this is Russ. He asked about making sure. Should you make sure to lock your mirror up if you are using a mirrored camera?
If you're using a mirrored camera and you're not using a timer and such, and even if you are, it does benefit you if you lock your mirror up. It will make it a lot easier for you to not have shake of your camera as the photos are taken.
Oh, okay. You are two of my favorite camera presenters, just so you know.
Thank you, Russ.
Yes, ma'am. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for the call in, Russ. If we have anybody else that would like to call in and ask a question.
What size was the truck we used?
The truck size was HO scale, Julie. Christine is she likes the little people and the little scene, and there's always something coming from eBay with that.
So it's about an inch long.
I'm not really sure.
Like this little guy that's sitting on the flower on the slide now is like the tip of my pinky long. So very tiny.
Let's see. Bob says light of focus closer. I think he's having a conversation. Macklin has a switch on it. What does this do? What does Jackie's switch do? It's probably. Do you think it may be the switch that allows her to do the focus closer and farther? What does the switch say, Jackie?
My 105 has a switch that goes from infinity to. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. It's right behind us, so give me a second. Full or infinity to 0.5 meters. So whenever I'm doing macro, I have to have it on full because otherwise I have to be too far from the object to get focus.
Now, why would you want to, if it will give you the full range of focus from the minimum distancing to infinity, why would you want to ever switch it to a part of that?
If you know you're shooting more distant, like if you're using it for a portrait lens, it benefits you to move it to the other settings. But when you're using macro, you want it to be on the full frame so that it.
So ideally, if they have this switch on their camera and they know they're only shooting something close up, why make the camera hunt through that entire range of focus, and you stick it to that? So it's quicker, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Mary Lou is asking if we can explain a little bit more about mirror lockup.
So what the mirror does in your camera is allows you to see the photo whenever you're looking through to focus it. If you do mirror lockup, it pushes it up so you can't see through. But if you have it, it pulls up the mirror so that you can't look through to see focus. But if you're doing focus stacking, or if you're, it shutters the camera each time because it's flipping up and down.
It allows the SLR to be an SLR, which is what's called single lens reflex. And the reason what that means is that basically is you're seeing through your pentaprism and your viewfinder, you're seeing exactly what your lens sees. So therefore the mirror locks up at the last minute, at the last second, split second, honestly, and allows your sensor to take over. Now the problem is that mirror has to, when you're shooting, let's say you're shooting something, that mirror locks up so quickly and so violently that you can have shake. If you're shooting astrophotography, or like Christine says, you're shooting macro, you kind of want to mitigate that. And typically the way that works is you'll click the button once, it'll lock the mirror up. You click it again, and you'll shoot. In the case of what Christine does with her focus stacking, she will use live view, which basically already locks your mirror up, and it uses the constant video from the sensor.
The other thing is, if you use the focus stacking in the camera, one of the options on the bottom is silent mode, which you really want to use because otherwise your mirror is going up and down between each shot, so it can add the shake. So if you have that turned on for silent mode, that benefits you whenever you're doing your focus stacking.
And that's going to save your shutter, your shutter cloth as well.
Correct.
The cameras are only they're only rated for so many tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, depending on if you have an amateur, consumer, prosumer model, and they will wear out. So therefore, if you have a silent mode where you can just not worry about that, definitely use it. I know Nikon's got it, so therefore Canon either has it or Canon will get it pretty soon. And of course, if you're using a mirrorless camera, all the better. Yeah, there you go. Jackie says she has a lens that says 0.31 meters to infinity, 0.48 to infinity, and that's the 100 millimeter. She should also have. That's just basically, if they're putting that in there, then they're saying that the lens is probably working a little bit harder to get from 0.31 to 0.48 meters, and therefore they're giving you the option to kind of cut that 0.31 to 0.48 out of there, and therefore be able to focus a little bit faster, get to your focal point that much quicker.
So if you're using the macro, you want it on the 0.31 in order to have that closer.
Gotcha. We have any other questions? I don't know if we haven't had another call in. If we have any other calls or if we have any other questions, feel free to put them out there. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up. We'll give people another, how about 20 seconds?
Okay.
What have you ever I had a question and I had a question, I just lost it. Isn't that terrible? Maybe someone else will ask it.
Happens to the best of us.
Yeah, everyone else is thanking you for joining us tonight, and you. At first, we were thinking about canceling this, and because you really, I mean, Christine had a heck of a presentation, and she really had set it up so that everyone in the meeting room would be able to have a bunch of shooting stations. So that's why you kind of kept it short and sweet. And she had a bunch of presentations that people can bring their camera in and either try different lenses or try shooting certain things on light boxes or different lighting situations. Susan asks for when do we get to vote on the short list for next year's themes? You know what? I'm not entirely sure. That might be a Michelle question. Maybe Michelle can answer that in the chat. Mary Lou is asking for the photo assignment. How many macro shots? How many macro shots do you want to submit, Mary Lou? If I said 3, would everybody be happy with that? And we will also make a Facebook group post on that photo assignment, and we'll send out an email as well. So macro photography. Tell me some more about what's the craziest macro setup you've ever set up?
I don't know if I've done anything real crazy. Usually I use natural light or my ring flash.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have the softbox that I've been using, and it's a lot of fun to use. All of them are good.
Okay. I think a lot of people are saying that Michelle says the first round of voting does not end until Friday. A lot of people are saying they like the idea of 3. Now, I know you haven't shot too many crazy things, but what about light? what are some other options you have for lighting? I think you mentioned what did you mention, the flashlight, gels.
You can put gels, and even on my ring flash, we have gels for each of the lights so that you can make them, and you could even like do a different color on each side to get different backgrounds and stuff. Or
I've also seen you shoot through different glass as well,
Right.
and you're kind of intentionally degrading the lens quality. You're using this, expensive, really nice macro lens, and you're intentionally shooting through a marble or through a piece of stained glass or something, and that turns out really, really beautiful as well.
Right. You could also shoot through those glass balls.
Oh
get
yeah.
those.
Okay.
That would be fun. That would give you a different view.
What's that?
of
That's
things.
the lens ball, right?
Yeah, the lens
The
ball.
lens ball, fantastic. Usually you don't need macro for that though, but I guess you can get
You
really
don't have
close
to,
on
but
something.
You could.
Oh, that's
It's
interesting.
just an idea.
Well, everybody, I want to thank you for joining us tonight for the stream and Christine's presentation. Thank you so much, Christine. We really appreciate you having you here.
You're very welcome. It was my pleasure. I had a lot of fun putting this together.
Okay. Well, like I said, we don't have any more questions, so we're going to go ahead and end it. Thank you for watching. Next week, we have Megan from Honeybee Photography, and she's got an interesting presentation coming up, which is the psychology of photography. And everyone is asked to bring some of their older photographs or maybe an old family album. And I think she's got something interesting up her sleeve for that. Make sure you join us. It'll be here Wednesday, right here on the Facebook group, 7 p.m. Eastern. Thank you and good night.